So welcome to this episode in the podcast series about wisdom, brought to you by Stuart Neville from Mindful Developments and Adam Wells from adamwells.com. Here's another question. How important is it to be realistic? Is realism and being realistic in our expectations and our assumptions and our beliefs and our attitudes, etc., is that important?
Good question. I think it is important. I think it's a balance. There's that element of realism. When people wake up, it's terrifying because you embrace reality, and to embrace reality is life is inherently uncertain. I don't know what's going to happen, and we can shut ourselves down. And I don't want to know what reality is because it terrifies me. I think reality is the fact that life is constant movement. It's ever changing, and being awake to reality is recognizing how we meet with our thinking this ever changing world. And reality is you can either approach it in a very pessimistic way. Oh my God, it's so scary. And reality, I don't want to know. Or reality is life is ever changing. This is an exciting thing. It's inherently uncertain. And I'm going to embrace this uncertainty. And embracing uncertainty, I actually find security. I find comfort knowing that I can adapt to the situations that are presented to me. And I think that's what reality is. Accepting reality for what it is means I know how to adapt to whatever comes up, how to respond to these ever-changing moments in life.
Yeah, really interesting, yeah. I think it's undeniable, tell me if you don't agree, but I think it's undeniable that we live our life on the whole with certain assumptions and expectations. And your brain kind of creates them. It creates these models of, the way the world is, how things should be, etc. And based on experience, and normally if it's functional, it works. But then those assumptions and expectations often butt up against the reality of our experience, and we realise that it's misaligned. We might expect life to be fair. That might be, not logically, but we might, in terms of our assumptions and our attitudes, expect life to be fair, or people to be thoughtful, or there to be justice in the world, or equality, or something like that. And most of the time we have that expectation, other people do, and that's broadly the rules of the game, but sometimes it doesn't. So when we have an unrealistic expectation and then we bump up against the reality that doesn't comply with our expectation, then we suffer. And I think if we can understand the misalignment of our attitudes and assumptions and expectations with reality, and then we become more realistic, that's part of the development of realism. I think that's a quality of wisdom.
It's exactly that. For me, it's in the sense of, my world with Camino de Santiago, where those assumptions and expectations meet with reality is on the first day of the walk across Spain, when people arrive at the Pyrenees Mountains. A lot of people are completely unaware the size of the walk, the size of the mountains, and suddenly, oh my God, I've got to walk for 13 miles upwards and 5 miles across and 3 miles down, and I've got to carry this very heavy backpack. I had no idea. I'm not sure I can manage it. And it's exactly that. In that moment, assumptions and expectations meet with reality. And the learning is, in that moment, how do I adapt to this new reality? And that's reframing the thinking. What do I have to get rid of out of my rucksack? Or what pace do I walk over this mountain? Do I charge at it, or do I walk very slowly? So it's bringing that wisdom of the moment too into the situation.
Yeah. That's kind of meaningful to me, that if you suffer because there's a misalignment of your expectations with the way things are, which is basically, that's the kind of definition of suffering, really, isn't it? Buddhist perspective, you suffer and you understand the misalignment. If you understand it, then that's the beginning of your change. You're changing your attitude, your expectations are changing. If you understand the way that they're not realistic and the pain you experience as a result of them not being realistic, then you'll change.
Exactly. I think that's the key thing, is the willingness and having the self-awareness that this moment of pain is to open me up, to awaken me to change my behavior, my response. Plenty of people suffering on that first day won't change their behavior. They'll maybe just take a taxi, so to go over the mountain. So there isn't that shift in consciousness around what is the other way of facing this reality. You've just denied the reality by jumping into a taxi.
A bit like that saying, isn't it? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, or it's not, I don't really like that phrase, but it's that thing that's staying with the difficulty, just owning the challenge and the uncomfortableness of it. And I think it's, kind of not running away from
transforming the suffering into wisdom.
Your misalignment of your expectations of the way things are. Because there's certain different pain in life that's kind of unavoidable. But when your pain comes from you being naive or immature or unrealistic, then there is something that can be, you can do something about that. If you grow, then you're not going to suffer in the same way you adapt.
I think that's the point. That's just simply it. It's exactly that. It's in this moment of pain and suffering, how am I meant to adapt to this new reality of where I am? And it's also that being humble to the moment, getting out of our ego to think that this is in charge, to recognizing actually there's something much bigger than me at play here. It's not about this. It's something I'm meant to learn. What am I meant to learn in this moment? And that's the key thing. That's the recognition. But if our ego is so short, no, I don't need to learn anything. It's that sort of willingness to be a beginner again, to recognize that actually I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm out of my natural environment. I'm a beginner in this unfamiliar world. And because that's the new reality.
That makes me think of something really important, which is that if you have an attitude that's misaligned with reality, then you realize that that's been problematic and you've suffered, and then it doesn't all happen immediately necessarily in the same moments or overnight, but it's easier to see, I think, if you look back over a period of your life, something in you changes or shifts perspective and attitude and becomes less unrealistic, and then you're more able to kind of be with the way things are. I think that process of suffering and realigning and coming back to the way things are, I think there's a reward in that, and I think that's how we begin to feel more joy and more appreciation, because we're able to, we're kind of, our attitudes are more aligned with the way things actually are, and we can appreciate the way things are as opposed to expecting them to be different. And it's that thing of, isn't it, kind of letting go or getting at your own way or those kind of things, that when a shift happens.
I think you're finding that thing, the flow, you're just into the natural flow of life. It is what it is. You're not trying to change anything. You're not fighting against anything. You're just recognizing, well, this is the reality and these are the choices I have available. I can only influence what's within my control. The rest of it is beyond me. So why am I going to bother about that, worry about that?
But what about appreciation and joy? What about the joy of accepting and appreciating and valuing and opening up to the wonder or the mystery or the quality that life has in the moment when you just accept it for what it is?
I think that comes from the suffering. When I did my walk over those mountains, the Pyrenees Mountains, I collapsed 3 weeks previously and I was in a lot of pain when I started the walk. And the only thing I could do was, in the moment, I said, right, I'm going to walk very, very slowly. And I was in a lot of pain. And to overcome the pain, I just said, right, I'm going to connect to the beauty of nature. Listen to the rustle of the trees. Listen to the gurgling of the streams, the birds singing. And I did that and the pain just went away. And it really was a natural healing. But it was that in that moment there was joy, there was bliss, there was pleasure. But that only came out of the suffering. And I think it's when we've gone through those moments of suffering and questioned, there must be something more than this. You do get an answer of some sort, and that's an opening into this joy, this beauty that's always ever present, which we ignore because of the noise of life. It's there constantly. Behind the noise of life is the beauty of life. But we have to strip away that noise and we're left with the beauty.
I think so. It's the kind of almost like the expectation is that things were different than they are in reality, then we would be, that's where happiness comes from, instead of finding the happiness in the way things are. And even in life's impermanence and transience, there's a different mindset and a different, attitude and perception to think actually my joy and my fulfillment and my quality of life is going to come from something other than the way things actually are, right here and now.
This is maturity. Life is a letting go process. We have to let go of everything. And as we age and our body gets more and more infirm, we're just left with our spirit. We're looking at the little joys of life moments. That's elderhood, to recognize that we're relinquishing our adult powers, all the money and all the trappings, to just be left with this simple freedom of my spirit and who I am and where I am, and just the natural abundance around us, our family, the joy that our family brings and everything else. I think it's a natural process if we're open to it.
I think being realistic in that sense, in that kind of deep and more nuanced sense, is something to be aware that there's a great value in that. It's not realistic in a kind of boring, designed way. Might be an element of that as well, but realistic in the sense of appreciating the reality of our experience and what it is to be alive, and in a kind of joyful and appreciative way, as well as an understanding when it's the pain of not being aligned to the way things are. I think realism as a kind of path from pain to joy in that way we've been talking about is an important principle, I think, to be mindful of.
I think it's a necessity. I really do. I think it's a necessity to step into that. At some point, you've got to wake up to reality. if things are going to change.
Yeah.
If you're in a place of unhappiness or whatever it is, what is reality?
And it's difficult if you're not aligned because there's something to change and that can be painful. But there's a promise of freedom and a release from suffering the more we are aligned to the way things are. And so I think it is a necessity as well. I agree. It's life's. It's the challenge of being a human being, isn't it? To be conscious and reflective and to have this kind of ability to be individual, to be subjective in our mind and in our thinking and our relationships, and to be able to reflect and make sense of our life in that kind of individual, becoming like an individual rather than just being completely instinctive, then to bring that personal experience back in line with the life that actually we're part of, opposed to kind of being at odds with it. Yeah. I think is a nice way of thinking about the wisdom journey or what have you.